Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing good. It's time for a briefing. I'm not going to call it a Saturday briefing. I'm going to have to kind of replan the way I do these briefings. Used to years ago, I had a mentoring group that we would meet on a regular basis, and then I also had some great Sunday school teachers at Fort Mill, and so I would do a Saturday briefing to my mentoring guys, to the guys in my mentoring uh, group, but also to the teachers to try to train them as well. And so I did it every Saturday, but I lived in one place and I traveled some, but most of the time I was right there as a pastor, taking care of my parish, taking care of my congregation. And so it was a little easier. My life was a little more predictable. All that changed when I came out here to the amazing North Central region, and I now have a territory that is about as big as the original 13 colonies. And so most Saturdays, I'm in a hotel somewhere trying to do all this and do everything else and travel and upload and post stuff when I don't have a real good signal and I'm traveling through the prairies. And so, whine, I know. But anyway, I'm going to change my Saturday briefing to a weekly briefing. And then again, with the crazy life I live, I may not be able to do it every week, but I will try. And so I'm going to start shooting for Tuesdays. And usually I'm back in the office on Sunday night late, or as we did yesterday, we got in on Monday. We left out Thursday, went to Lemon, and Sanja spoke down there, and we spent a little time with the pastor and his family on Thursday. Then we drove, had some meetings all the way out on our way, all the way out to Great Falls, and spent Sunday there, and with Joe and Jane Bickford. Next Sunday is their last Sunday. They're retiring, and so I wanted to go out and meet with that congregation and honor the Bickfords. And so we enjoyed that trip. And then with it being Memorial Day, we stopped over in Glendive, Montana. Have a beautiful state park there that we went. Has a lot of kind of like the Badlands, and has the same terrain there. And then we went to Beach, North Dakota, at a beautiful or a nice little pottery shop there, and Sanja bought some things. I guess will be heirlooms for us as a family. She brought some really nice pottery, and then we went to Teddy Roosevelt and hiked to one of our trails out there that we like, and then we kind of coasted on in. So anyway, that's a lot. You don't care, but we try to enjoy the journey. We have a lot of traveling that we have to do, so we try to travel at a pace that is sustainable and enjoyable. And so we enjoy being with the great ministers and people of the North Central region, but we also just enjoy this incredible, beautiful place that God has planted us. And so, long story short, Saturdays are really tough to try to pull this off. And so we're going to shoot for a day during the week, and I'm going to shoot for Tuesday. So anyway, all that said, today's briefing, this is Stories Volume 2. And a great way to remember principles is with stories, and then just to remember the stories and lessons learned and joys enjoyed and all of the good stuff that goes with it. So I have two stories that I want to share with you today, and so here's the name of the lesson: Stories, Volume 2, both of which include the word ass. Okay, we're kind of squeamish in this world today, so I wanted to go ahead and let you know. And if that offends you, this is where you need to turn it off and move over to something a little more family friendly, I guess, if that's how you feel. But let me just give a disclaimer here. I grew up in a King James Version world. I was probably the last generation that grew up on the King James Version. And the King James Version, I didn't know there were others. I remember the Living Bible came out, and that was kind of neat, and I enjoyed it. And then others, one right after the other. But I grew up, cut my teeth on the King James Version, and it's kind of funny to me now as I look at people, as we get a little squeamish sometimes. We try to tame the Bible down. We try to tame God down. I remember back in those days, God was God. I mean, I never questioned, a God of war, God of lightning, God could do what he wanted to do. God was a God of love as well. But the King James Version just is right straight down the middle of the road sometime. And so uh, the word ass was a common word that you heard from the pulpit. It was, and an ass is an animal of the horse family, which is typically smaller than a horse and has longer ears and a braying call. Of course, we know it today as a donkey. And so, anyway, that's kind of my disclaimer, and so I have two stories that both the word ass has a big part to play in them. They were very important, pivotal moments in my life, stories in my own life where this was true. And so the first story, and I think there's some good lessons here. The first story is my first sermon. And I won't get into all that went into that, my calling. But anyway, my dad, God love him, he was pastoring in Hamer, South Carolina. Those were precious people there that loved me, loved mom and dad. And so anyway, Dad tortured them and let me try on my spurs as a preacher for the first time. And so I got up and I preached that night. I think it was a Sunday night, if I remember correctly. That's back when you had Sunday night service as well. And so I preached for over an hour. I don't know what I was thinking. And my first sermon was over an hour. And in my sermon, I was preaching on going out. We need to go out and win the lost and all this stuff. And I pointed my finger at them and I said, you know what you need to do? You need to get up off your ass and go out and tell people about Jesus. I was just full of myself. I'll never forget the conversation that my dad had with me afterward. He was kind, he was gracious, he was not condemning, he did not get all up in my face. It was my first sermon. You're going to make rookie mistakes. But I never forgot this. My dad said, son, maybe instead of telling people they need to get up off their ass and go out and tell people about Jesus, why don't you use words like, maybe we need to get up off our stool of do nothing, and go out and tell people about Jesus. I never forgot that. I never forgot it. And so there's a question that I ask myself regularly with every sermon, with these notes, when I'm about to have an interview or a conversation with people, even making a phone conversation, especially if there's something that I know I've got to cover. There's two things here. First of all, ask yourself, is there a better way to say this? Is there a better way to say this? That's what my dad was teaching me. It's like the old story of the guy that went to church and it was not a Christian, but he'd go for it with his wife to keep her happy, and the preacher just hammered away at him for years and he wouldn't get saved. And a new preacher came to town, and on the first Sunday, the man got up and went down to the altar and gave his heart to the Lord. And his wife asked him after service, I don't understand, all these years, this other pastor was so faithful and he would preach and you never responded. And on this Sunday, you went down and got saved, gave your heart to the Lord. What was different? This guy was a good preacher, but it was no better than our other pastor. He said, the other pastor, all those years, when he preached about me going to hell, he preached like he wanted me to go there. When this new preacher preached, he preached like he didn't want me to go there. It's how you say it. And so ask yourself, is there a better way to say this? We that are handlers of the word, communicators, our vocal cords, our tongue, that is our tools of the trade. We speak. And not only from the pulpit, but when we speak anywhere, in interviews, walking down the hall, people in town that know we're a preacher, everything we say is different than when other people say it. And so, Dad said, son, maybe next time say stool of do nothing. I never forgot that. Is there a better way to say it? And then here's another thing that he was teaching me. Instead of you better, remove the word you and insert we. We're in this together. And I try to never preach a sermon that I don't need. I'm the first person that needs the sermon. I try to preach a sermon. Let's don't preach to people. Let's preach together. We're in this together. There's a world of difference. Somebody giving you the right act and they're telling you what to do than someone that says, we need to improve. And so we as preachers, sometimes we're not careful. We can put ourselves in God's place and we're pointing down at people. No, we're in this together. Preach a sermon that you need as much as the people. And when they see you with them, they'll go with you to the altar before God. So I say this every day. I've said it this morning. I have a few little affirmations that I say every day. And one of these is I will thanks, thinks. I will thanks before I speak. I say this because I forget it sometimes. I have to remind myself. But first of all, is it true? Is it helpful? Something can be true but not helpful to say it. Number 3, is it inspiring? It's how you say it. What are you going to inspire them to do? The old fable of the sun and the wind trying to get the man to take his coat off? So is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Thin. Is it necessary? And I have a little rule of it. An opinion unasked for is an opinion not wanted. They're either not ready or they don't want it. They're not teachable. And so is it necessary that I say this? And there's a lot of things that could be said, but is it absolutely necessary? And then is it kind? What's the motivation of my heart? Am I trying to fix people, straighten them out? Or am I trying to help them? I care for them. And then S, thinks. I know we don't use this, I thinks. But when it comes to your speech, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? And is it succinct? That word means you say the right thing with no more, no less than the right number of words. And I've learned the more I talk, the greater the chance of sin. The greater the chance that I stick my big foot in my mouth. And the more we just ramble on and go off on rabbit trails, the greater the chances we're going to hurt somebody unnecessarily. So anyway, that's my first story, my first sermon. And I've never used the word ass in that way, at least, anymore. Now, here's the second story. This was the day I was called an ass. Okay? And this was many years later. And this was during my time at Fort Mill, and we had a dynamic, amazing prayer partner ministries. And I had guys that committed to call me, pray for me once on the same day every month. And they would call me. And many times they would call me and they'd pray with me. They would have a word from the Lord. I mean, it was just really, it was a great time. And that was when our church saw some of its greatest growth, when our prayer partner ministry was really at its strongest. And when we would get off base with that or get our attention on other things, looking back, that our church would lag some. So I believe in prayer, and especially you get men praying. So anyway, early one morning, I had a phone call. I had a little study there. I lived in the Parsons at that time, and in the back of the house there was a nice little study, and I was back there, had a phone, and my prayer partner of the day called, and he was crying. I mean, he was crying, "Oh, Pastor, I've been reading in the Bible this morning, and I've got a word for you." And he had been reading about Jesus when he came in on Palm Sunday. It was during Palm Sunday, I guess, but he had been reading about Jesus come riding in, and he said, "Oh, Pastor," said, "when I read that, I thought of you. You're the ass that brings Jesus to us every Sunday." And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to that, and this precious, godly man, and I'm thinking, he just called me an ass, and I'm supposed to thank him for it. That's what I was thinking. And I didn't tell him that. I just went along with it. But I've never forgotten that story. And you know, he was right. He was right. A pastor is nothing more than the ass that brings Jesus to the people. Now, there's two things I want to highlight here real quick with this, and I don't want to go unnecessarily long, but there's a little side issue that I want to remind you of. Okay, don't focus so much on what people say. Focus on what they mean. I wish they'd do that for you and me. There's a lot of times we get ourselves in trouble from the pulpit. We don't mean it, but people read into what we say what they want to read into it sometime. But we do the same. I know as an overseer now, when I go into a church, often I will be treated rudely. Not often, but I will sometimes be treated rudely or kept at a distance. And I don't take it personal. Just recently, I had about an hour conversation with a good layman. And this long story that goes back 20 years, to me, it was not that big a deal. I don't know what, but in his world, he had been mistreated, and nobody had given him a hearing. And so I sort of took one for the team, because I knew he wasn't angry at me, and I wanted to let him. Most people don't have to have their way, but they would just like to have a say. And I let him have a say. And then God used that to bring some closure. We had a good prayer, and now when I see him, it's entirely different. And a lot of times when people are angry, or people are cynical, or people are short with you, it's not what they say, it's what they mean. And if you dig below what's being said, you'll find a lot of times there's hurt, or there's expectations, or there's needs that they don't know how to communicate. So that's the first lesson. But the main lesson I learned from this, and here's how I kind of couch it. Courage is the virtue that makes all other virtues possible. If you don't have courage, then you can't stand up for the truth. You will compromise. All the other virtues that we consider what godly men and women need to do. If you don't have courage, you can't be pure, be truthful, be honest. You'll capitulate, you'll give in. But here's another part of this. But humility is the virtue that makes all other virtues acceptable to God. And what I learned from that story, or from the story I just shared with you, when the man said, "Pastor, you're like the ass that brings Jesus to the people," I was reminded of the importance, he's right. The importance of not getting above myself, to stay humble. Mark Twain said, describing one man, he says, "He's a good man in the worst possible way." Have you ever met people like that? James, the brother of Jesus, put it this way in his little epistle, chapter 4, verse 6, "God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble." And I want to remind us, especially those of us in the ministry, again, when we speak for God and we're in this position of responsibility and people come to us with their needs and their hurts and they look to us to be a leader and all that stuff can kind of go to your head and you can begin to take yourself a little too serious. You've heard me talk about my reflection questions, my monthly diagnostic reflection questions that keep me on track. And my question today, it just works out really good today. I answer this the first of the month to remind myself of what I need to be doing and who I need to be focusing on. Here it is. Who am I here for? Who am I here for? And I have in little quotations, my purpose can be found just across the border of what's in it for me. And I remind myself, I have to remind myself, and I reflect over the month, and from my position, from this chair that I'm sitting in, my number one, I'm here to help these pastors, help the pastors win, because when a pastor wins, we all win. But you know what? The ultimate answer, under Christ, but anybody that's in the ministry, you know who we're really here for? We're here for the laity. We don't need a pastor if there's no people. We don't need an administrative bishop if there's no people. I remember he's a good man, was a great leader. I remember talking to a former general overseer. He was sitting there when he was general overseer. Good man, I love and honor him. And I was at a meeting and he was talking about all these plans and different things that we need to do. And I said, well, now how's this going to impact the local church? I was a pastor. I was thinking about it as a pastor. How's this going to impact the local church? And he said, the local church is important to the church. And that's when I knew, much as I love him and honor and respect him, he had gone a little adrift. The local church is the church. It's those people that we forget sometimes. And, pastors, you and I can forget that. And we can begin to think it's about us. And again, this is not in our region, but I just recently heard of a new pastor comes into a church, and about 7 months later, they're closing the church down. It was a relatively new church. And so just completely destroyed it. What did he do? He came in and he completely changed the vision, changed the logo, the website, just their whole identity and sold different things and just completely changed the whole direction of what he wanted to do. Never mind who was there. It never dawned on him to ask, what do you want? How can I help you win? What's your vision? This is your church. I work for you. I'm here to serve you. I want to bring Jesus to you. Together, remember the first story, we will figure out what the next thing to do in light of what God has been doing. God didn't come just because a new preacher came in, got to change the vision. Now we're going to go in an entirely different way. God's plan had not changed. And a little humility would have saved a church and saved that young man's ministry. We are just the ass, the donkey, the vehicle, the instrument, the vessel, the servant that serves God's people. And humility, a good dose of humility, makes us so far more effective and gets us out of the way so the people can see the real leader, which is Jesus Christ. Well, there's my little sermon for the day, for the week. Ask yourself, first of all, is there a better way to say this? And number two, who am I here for? A little humility to realize I'm here for the good people that pay the bills, and more importantly, that Jesus died for. Love you guys and gals, especially the amazing ministerial team of the North Central region. Thanks to you. I appreciate you. I work for you. And I count it an honor and a privilege. Let's do great things together this week. Let's run to win for the gospel's sake. And all of our friends, prayer partners, supporters, all of you, wherever this goes, maybe there's a couple lessons for you in this as well. Love you. As I said, let's keep running to win. I'll see you around the bend. I'm coming to your town soon, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. Bye-bye.